1st. Wow. 6:01, the school building committee meeting. Thank you all for joining us. Let's get right into it. So I know I didn't have any public comment. Ms. Linville, I don't think any was sent to you either. Not that I was made aware of. All right, so we're gonna get right into turning this over to Margaret. She's gonna help us with a debrief of the designer interviews and to help us determine our next steps. So Margaret, I will let you take over. I can see you now. Good evening.
Excellent. Hey there, everybody. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. I see Mark is outside. And Whitney and Ron are in front of a tree. I want to introduce Tom O'Neill, who's here with me. So we've had a couple of meetings where Bob Stevens joined us, and actually Bob couldn't come tonight, so Tom is stepping in. He is our fearless leader here in the New England office of Answer Advisory. He's what's called the managing director. So Tom, thank you for coming and sort of backing me up. The other person who's going to join, and I don't see him here quite yet, but
He's on.
He's on? Are you here, Pete Timothy?
No, I'm here.
Oh, there's Pete Timothy. All right, so I want to introduce Pete Timothy. So Pete Timothy is an independent estimator with AM Fogarty, and Pete, I'm not going to count how many years we've been around, but I will say that Pete worked on the previous estimate for the Holyoke projects on the owner side, but he does work as a consulting estimator with lots of estimators all over the state, and with a particular focus on public projects, and with a particular focus on schools. So one of the first things we're going to do, I'm going to just talk a little bit about process.
Margaret?
Yes,
Sorry,
sir.
just hang tight. So Stephanie Garcia is here to translate for Camelia. So we could set her up as a translator. I don't know how that function works, Aaron.
I think already send up S. Garcia as a translator. There's a globe at the bottom. Hay un globo debajo ahí que tú tienes que apretar. But I want to make sure that I called you Sam Garcia. Stephanie Garcia is logged in as Sam Garcia is in that room. Are we good?
Yeah, Steph's on Sam's computer. I think we're all set.
I think I see Camelia nodding, so I think we're good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So Pete Timothy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about process. Pete is going to talk a little bit about construction costs in the current market, because that was a big question that came up from the interview, was sort of how to think about this. And then after Pete leaves, I'm going to talk through a couple of different issues that you had asked for a comparison of. And then what I'd like to do, having done that, is sort of go around and hear from everybody. But I'm going to seize the screen at this point and talk through the slides that we created here. So again, just to recap, so we're going to talk a little bit about next steps, talk about cost, we're going to talk about schedule comparison, and we're going to talk about some points of comparison with the design approaches of the designs. Oh, am I going to be able to? Okay, so next steps. So I think before we start, I want to just recap how we're going to get to a decision, and there are some choices. So I'm going to make this presentation. We're going to have a discussion. Then the committee can decide at that point to rank the applicants. The committee can also decide to rank the applicants at a future meeting. The committee can decide whether they have additional questions, and they can decide whether an additional interview would be helpful to answer questions. Now, I will tell you that's not typical. Typically, there's one interview, but I did check with the MSBA to confirm that if you want to have some subset of the applicants come back to ask further questions, we can do that. You don't have to. It's a choice. And then if there's an interview, we would need to decide who will be interviewed. So that's what we're going to talk about after we kind of get through the content. All right. All right, so discussion of cost. So I'm going to take this down and turn the floor over to Mr. Timothy. So Pete, why don't you start by just explaining a little bit about why you said when I asked you if you're available for this meeting, it was a really busy time of year for starters. I mean, how many schools are you working on at this point at one time?
I have 3 MSBA schools going on right now this month. Fortunately, that's a lot of our business. Just they build so many schools and they require so much intense estimating. It's a good focal point of our business. So fortunately, they keep us very busy.
So can you talk a little bit about you? So you were involved with the estimate for the prior projects, which were designed, the 2 buildings designed by Jones Whitsett. And now the estimate, I think, for the construction cost estimate for the Lawrence site, which was the downtown site, was $478 a square foot. And for the Peck site, 522, it was bigger because there was more site work and there was more, and there was the demolition of the building. So hence the difference in price. So can you talk a little bit about where the market has gone since then and what you see in terms of what's possible in terms of the range of construction costs and what makes a difference?
Sure. Well, if we're turning back the clock and going back to 2018, and we're projecting costs now to 2022, you're looking at, and I haven't gone back because a lot of this requires intense analysis, but you're looking at roughly 20 to 25% increase in construction cost. So for example, if it was 500 a square foot in 2018, you're up to 625 a square foot now, all things being equal. So we've seen a huge increase in construction costs. And I'm sure you guys see that all the time on the TV. Prices going up, the supply and demand is low, steel prices have doubled, lumber has doubled, and we're seeing that in bid prices right now. Currently, the bid numbers that I'm getting, I just had Swampscott Elementary come in about 4 weeks ago, and that came in at $510 a square foot. And that's a project that went through serious value engineering and cost reductions just to get it to that 510 a square foot point. I have most of my elementary schools right now that are going to get bid in 2023 and 2024. We're in the roughly the 600 a square foot range. And, there's not one school isn't, there's not one number that represents a school cost. There's a huge range too. I have elementary schools that get up to 700 a square foot. And what we run into is just expensive site costs and soil conditions and so forth. And towns require net zero and higher expensed projects just because of the demand of the town. So there's a huge range of cost per square foot as well once we start throwing things in. But in general, you're just going through a huge escalation period right now with construction cost.
Does anybody have any specific questions for Pete while we have him?
I'll ask one.
Okay.
Hi, Pete. Thanks for joining us. So it seems like you do estimates for a wide range of projects. Are you seeing anybody able to come in below where they expect to be, or are you seeing anybody where you're significantly lower than your average?
We are, right now we're hanging in there. I think we've got a handle on the market. We have a handle on the market.
Yeah. Erin needs to jump in.
I need to quickly ask people to slow down talking a little bit to assist with translation.
Oh, okay.
Choose words closely, choose words carefully so less needs to be translated if possible.
Okay.
Totally fair. Sorry, Peter, go ahead.
So Erin, a year ago, we were off by 10 to 12% our estimates. the market was just going up faster than what we could predict and track. So we weren't looking very smart. I think we've caught up with that. I think when we did Swampscott, I think that proved that we brought that full circle. And I think we have a good handle on the market right now. But no, I don't see numbers dropping. Everything I hear and see, numbers are not going to be dropping. They're going to continue to escalate. The question is when they'll start coming back, because we all know they will start trailing back down again. I have no idea when that's going to happen. And for me, budgeting these jobs, I'm not going to start de-escalating things until I see it happen. And it just hasn't yet.
I have a question for Peter.
Mr.
Yes.
Anderson.
Thank you, Peter. Good evening.
Actually, Whitney, could you just, when people jump in, could maybe you just explain what your role is in the city or the district? Whitney's a good example, for instance.
Thank you. I am the maintenance administrator for the Holyoke Public Schools, working together with a staff in coordination to oversee the capital projects, and then other people in the facilities and maintenance team orchestrate the custodial and the day-to-day repair activities. So my function is primarily in this role, as well as special projects. But Peter, in regards to a comment that you made for a recent estimate done a few months ago, two things. Number one, the escalation you've seen from 2018. Are we basically looking at the start of COVID in 2020? Is that really when things got out of control? Because I see a great amount of stability in 2018.
Oh, yeah, no, most definitely, Whitney. It was, it really was the fall of 2020. That's when things really skyrocketed.
Exactly. Yeah, supply chain.
It was shocking. It wasn't a gradual. It was all of a sudden, oh my God, numbers have just gone through the roof.
And that number, and you feel as though from that primary escalation time until current, in the 20s as far as the percentage of escalation?
Well, from trailing back to 2018 to 2022, I think we're looking at about a 25% increase.
Okay, thank you. Now, in regards to the recent estimate which you prepared for an elementary school, which came in at approximately 510 square feet with tremendous value engineering, which means cost savings potentials due to the design components and perhaps the methodology. What are some of the things, because you look at the intimate details of these, unlike anyone else in regards to the various components, where do you see these cost savings occurring? Just if you could make a general comment in regards to building design or some of the attributes that were built into it that offered such a tremendous value orientation.
What did it on that? It's the mechanical system, and I think the original system was a geothermal with chilled beams, and they switched to VRF, which is a variable refrigerant system, a Mitsubishi system. You probably have those a lot in your buildings now. That really saved a bulk of the money.
That's the basis of design for us at this current time.
That's good. So you've already made that decision. That's great. The other thing is, and I call it nickel and diming, but the design, it is what it is, and you can save maybe 5 to 10% simplifying or going to less expensive materials, but that's about as far as you can take it. It's really the systems where you save money.
Interesting. Do you see any paybacks for solar?
I can't answer that question because that's not my forte. I don't see it too often, though. We always do PV roughing in the buildings, but not too often do we see actual PV panels on the buildings themselves, and that's beyond my expertise.
Thank you for your time tonight, Peter.
So I see Dave has his hand up and Jamie has her hand up. Dave, you want to go next?
Yes, thanks. I just more of a general question, but for our comparisons, when you do these cost estimates, do you break it down between the components? In our case, it would be we have demolition, which would be one reimbursement rate, then we'd have the actual construction, and then we'd have the site preparation. Do you usually break it down that way? Because that would be very meaningful for our.
Most definitely. MSBA requires a pretty rigorous estimating process. You'll have two estimators. You'll have myself, and then the designer's estimate, and we'll sit down and have meetings, and we call it a reconciliation where we compare not only quantities and pricing but methodology. So and you have everything broken down: foundations, structure, concrete, demolition. As Margaret can talk about, there are costs that are reimbursed by the state and that are not. We have to isolate all those. So it's a very rigorous. Estimates tend to be 60 pages long, you know, a few thousand line items of bits and pieces. So there's a lot to it.
I'd actually be happy to share, if be useful. I can share the estimates from Pete's estimates from the previous project. And I just want to add to what Pete is saying. The reason is that the schematic, and we're going to talk about this later in the presentation, the schematic design estimate is going to be the basis of your funding agreement with the MSBA. And it's really, really important that you get it right. It's not something you don't want to rush through that part of the project, because if the number is wrong in the low direction, if there's an increased cost because of something you missed, or, as Pete's been struggling with, inflation outpacing his estimating for a period of time, that cost is on the community once the funding agreement is signed.
So there's a lot on the line. There's bonding, there's people's time. There's a lot. So we really have to be as sharp as possible.
Dave, did you have anything else?
No, that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, so I see Jamie and I see Mr. Tallman.
Hi there. I'm Jamie, and I am the Assistant Chief Procurement Officer for the City of Holyoke. Thank you, Peter, for being here. I just have a question because of your experience with working with schools, specifically with the MSBA. Do you feel that using a model school design versus a different design, does that play into any of the cost savings in your experiences, especially now with the different market changes? Do you think a model school would help keep those costs down, or it doesn't really matter? What's your opinion on that?
To answer that properly, Jamie, I would need specifics. I'd need to know exactly what's in that model school, because there's a whole variation too of, as we talked about, mechanical systems, site conditions, and so forth. There's so many variables. I really couldn't answer that quickly and easily.
Okay. And what about procurement methods like CM at risk or design bid build? Any experience with those? Like, do you feel one method's better than the other, especially keeping the cost estimates down?
He has a strong opinion about that.
I do have an opinion on that one. I can answer that one unequivocally. If you go Chapter 149A, CM at risk, you're looking at about a 7 to 8% increase over if you just did a straight Chapter 149, a design bid, obviously with pre-selection, but the CM process does add a bit more money to your construction project. At least that final, that initial bid number.
Do you think the CM at risk though, does it save time, and could that balance out some of that 7 to 8%, or no?
I don't see it. No.
Okay, and it's your professional opinion. That's what I'm asking.
No. I don't see it, and I don't propose one way or another, because they both had advantages. But if you're looking at bottom line, CM at risk is more expensive.
And I feel like that's where we're at. We're looking at bottom line. We're crunching numbers. So 7 to 8% of a $70 million project, it's still, substantial at the end of the day.
Swampscott was bid straight Chapter 149. That's no CM. It's a design and bid it. And the site was kind of complicated with soil issues, but they were able to do it without the help of the CM. So it was successful.
Okay.
But the documents have to be good, right? With that caveat. I mean, there's a very high premium on getting the bid documents, right?
That goes without saying, though. Yeah, and that's on the architect, and you'd want that anyways.
Right. Mr. Tallman.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Peter, for coming here tonight, and really look forward to your insight. I'm one of the city councilors in the city of Holyoke, and I'm also on the finance committee. that we'll be dealing with this issue in the coming months. A couple of weeks ago, we had the projects and we had the interviews. We went from one company going around 500 a square foot to another one looking at over 700 a square foot. Is that unusual for that to happen, or is that commonplace in your business? That range?
Well, I can't speak for what you heard because I wasn't there, but I can tell you, I'm just looking at some of the bid numbers we've had lately. Ashland Elementary, it was a CM job, and it was Flansburgh. That was $650 a square foot. It was a big job, complicated site. It was bid a year ago this time, December 2021. That was $650. I did Honeywell in Wellesley, and that's Metro Boston. Really fancy school, a little bit of limited site. That was $564 a square foot. I'm doing Westfield right now. Franklin has not been bid yet, but it will be bid. No CM. That's at $567. So you can see there's a range of cost. Oh, the other one, Hardy Elementary. I'm working on that right now. Also Metro Boston, that's $752 a square foot. So you can see there's quite a range of cost per square foot. It's easily $10 a square foot, or a 10% bottom line spread between these jobs very easily. So I'm not surprised at the spreads that you're getting in interviews.
Well, but I do have to add though that it's really important, and I think this didn't really happen in the too much in the conversation, but I want people to be thinking about this. So the folks in the interviews were talking about numbers now, and
Right.
we have to escalate when we think about this, where we will be escalating the numbers. The midpoint of construction, depending on who you talk to, is either late 2024 or late 2025, right? So that's at least a year and a half of escalation, and potentially more depending on how the overall schedule plays out. So I want people, when you're thinking about those numbers, remember right now we're talking about today's dollars, and the numbers that you see are likely to be, well, almost certainly will be somewhat higher. The question, as Pete said at the beginning, is, what's going to happen to the market now? And I think nobody's got a crystal ball on that, but I don't want anyone to get stuck on that number and think that that's what the number is going to be with escalation.
Well, sure. I mean, someone could come in and say, well, I did Brightwood Elementary School in Springfield. If you guys have seen that or looked at that. That was bid in 2019, and they say, oh, it was $440 a square foot, but right, you have to escalate it and also carry a certain amount of contingency, because guaranteed nothing goes according to plan, especially when it comes to construction and budgeting. It's always higher than you think it is. It's just the process.
Okay. Thank you, Peter.
Sure.
Mr. Soto?
I've heard, so I didn't really ask at the meeting, but and I want to understand. So my understanding of when we will get like the feasibility, as part of the feasibility study, once completed, there will be a budget that will give us what the square footage cost is going to be. So my question is, what were those numbers that we looked at the last meeting? Because I'm struggling to understand like how, without going through the feasibility study, there could be any like weight given to any of the numbers that we saw last week. Like what did those numbers represent at the last meeting? Because people are thinking of it like,
Yeah.
oh, if we go with this design, it's going to cost this much. And if we go with that design, it's going to cost that much. Is that in fact the case? I mean, without like, I know that escalation has to be factored in, but I just want to make sure I understand and everyone on this committee understands what those numbers were that we saw during the design selection process.
So, I would say, Anthony, that they weren't necessarily apples to apples. But it sort of goes back to what Pete is saying. It's like the devil's in the details, right? It's how much site work there is. It's how, whether that the demolition, I don't feel as though, because the question wasn't asked in a very specific way, or in some cases it was offered without being asked. You'd have to kind of sit down and say, and we could, give us a sense of a range for a project that included, construction cost, site cost, demolition cost, escalation. Unless you have asked the question in a way that someone's phrase is giving you a response that includes all those numbers, it's really hard and a little dangerous to compare them apples to apples.
And I, doing this all day long, couldn't tell you how much your building is going to cost right now, because I know nothing about your building, your program, and the site conditions. There's just too many things, too many hurdles to cross before you could even start talking at that level.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm still confused as to like what those numbers, like how did they come up with those numbers? Like what level of work went into telling this body that this design would cost X amount?
Well, I think that's a question that we can go back to folks and ask. We didn't get into that detail in the questions, but I would say that it isn't something any of those who weren't speaking, making the statements could offer, right? So I see that Mark Lubold has a question. Mark, are you coaching right now?
No, actually, I'm getting ready to go into the Patriots game. I try to find a quiet place. People are going nuts.
That's dedication right there, Mark.
That is dedication.
Hey, you know, right? So, Peter, my name is Mark Lubold. I'm a volunteer on the building committee. Thanks for coming in. You weren't at the last meeting, but we, had somebody came in, for the model school. They've built 3 schools that they're proposing. And I guess the question I have is, if you built 3 schools, how comfortable would you be with an estimate based on those designs? Given the fact that you did it 3 times before, you've actually gone through the bidding process 3 times, built 3 schools, how comfortable would you be, putting together figures based on those previous designs?
That's an interesting question. Well, I mean, if I was going to speculate, I certainly would have to get a good handle on the market and be able to escalate it to the point of bid. I would do that, and then I would have to really understand the site conditions, because that's the other variable. And site costs can range between 10 to 20% of the building cost.
Okay.
So it's a tough question to answer.
It definitely is, and that's, I think, part of the issue we're all having as a committee, because we did see a range from 500 to 750, and one of the model schools said that they feel that they could bring it in at 500, but we don't really know what was included in that. Were the site conditions included in that, demolition of the current school,
right.
And we probably have to have them back in and maybe ask those type of questions. But I was coming at it more from, a comfort level of, if you did, the same designs, the same materials, you'd probably have a pretty decent feel for what you could bring that building in. Forget the state, forget, that demolition, but I would think you would have a decent perspective on what you could bring that building in,
Yeah, no, hypothetically, the way you say that, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
The question is, how do you go from then to, you're going to build this in 2024, I assume?
Yes.
So how do you adjust whatever that past number was, whether it's a year or 2 old, to adjust from 2024? You have to have a decent handle on things. you can't say nothing's going to change.
Of course. Okay. Thank you, Peter.
Margaret, I have one last question for Peter.
Sure. And then I think we're going to let him go because I've got a couple other things I want to talk to you about. So Whitney, take it away.
Peter, just one last question. And obviously your experience for quite your professional career causes you to add escalation costs into every project based on what you're forecasting, your understanding and awareness of the numbers are. What is the current escalation factor that you're building into your estimates currently now? And I heard what you said earlier, until the market proves otherwise, I'm going to cautiously, it got ahead of you a couple of years ago. What number are you bringing into it now?
So right now, if I had to escalate something between present dollars and next year, a year from now, December 2023, I think I'm at 5.5%. I might go up a little bit more than that once I get a couple more bid results in the next month, but I think it's 5.5, Whitney. It's been as high as 10%.
For the year that you're anticipating.
For the year coming up.
Yeah.
Anytime we talk escalation, you have to put a time frame to it. So from now till next year, I think we're going to be 5.5% increase. And that's on top of these inordinately high numbers that are already seeing right now, like structural steel hit, and I'll just rattle a few things off, 5,500 a ton, membrane roof systems from deck on up hit 36 a square foot. All those numbers are almost double what we saw a few years ago.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So, Pete, we could probably keep asking you questions for another hour, but I think the folks who had particular questions have had a chance to talk to you. So thank you for coming. We're going to let you go and we're going to sort of move on, and I will catch up with you soon.
All right. Good luck in your decision, guys.
Thanks, Peter.
All right. Bye.
Okay. So, I think that if I could summarize, I think what I like about Pete is that, he talks about things in ranges, and hopefully he gave some context to how he approaches it. I'm glad the issue came up about how detailed these estimates are, because it's important to me that you all have confidence that we're going to have a designer on board soon. We're going to do these estimates. So I think understanding the level of detail of them and how important it is to have confidence in them is really important for the committee, because I know this feels risky and scary. So I'm gonna sort of picking up from what Pete had to say. I took some time I think you have seen this chart before, or a version of this chart. There's a sort of online data that the MSBA provides that's really useful, that plots every project that they have funded. And it's over a period of time starting back in January of 2009, and it's projecting out at the moment, at least, until July of 2024. So what I thought would be useful to understand the relative performance of the designers, was to take a page from what Frank Tedesco did, I think very intelligently. So you might remember in his presentation, he had a chart, the one that Whitney is referring to, where he showed his projects. What's the marker that's really useful, aside from whether there's lots of dots above you or below you, each one representing a project. This orange line is the MSBA's average project cost for new construction. So you can see Mount Vernon Group, I think has good reason to talk positively about their performance, because with really just, a couple of exceptions, and they're not very far above it, their projects are kind of very consistently below the average. This is Flansburgh. It's the same diagram, but with different dots. So the green dots are their projects. And then this is Jones Whitsett. So, I think what you can see is that over time, they've all actually had pretty good performance that was regularly at or below the average. I think what's been a little different is that Mount Vernon Group's most recent project, and Frank Tedesco talked about this, it's the Leahy School in Lawrence. That's this kind of city block project that has come in at a very low cost. Flansburgh has a project in the works that's sort of up here, and Jones Whitsett has a project that is up here. Right here, these two little blue circles, that is Lawrence and Peck in 2018 for reference. Okay. So, I think they've all done well. These recent projects are definitely sort of popping up higher. But as Pete mentioned, you have to kind of know a little bit more about the project to know if you're making apples to apples comparisons. So I hope that's helpful. Any questions about that? Yes.
Can you, because it's really tough to see any detail on there, can you talk in relationship to those three different firms and the most recent projects, and specifically where are they coming in at? For obviously they're different types of projects and they're different schools, but where are the numbers for each of the three architects currently for the work that they have proposed estimated at?
Oh, that's a good question, Whitney. I think I've got the.
Can you see it on the detail now?
You can't see it on this detail because it's actually clipped from the document, but I can open this on a separate screen and show you. So I'm going to take this down and I'm going to open this. Did I get the right document? Can folks see this chart and my little cursor moving around?
Oh, yeah.
So, honest to God, I love this chart. It's so helpful that the MSBA did that. So let me see if I can find those projects, Whitney. So I know the Leahy one is easy to find. So here I am. Don't know that I can make this much bigger on the screen. But this project that you can see, my cursor is hovering on it, and it's a square in blue. What that means is the project isn't built yet, right? So it's in development. If it's solid orange, it's been built. So this is Mount Vernon Group's project in Lawrence, which was the city block, you remember, with the playground on the roof. $472 a square foot. And they are expecting to put it out to bid in May of, or to finalize the negotiation in May of 2023. So that's that one. I think if I go up.
Margaret, can I ask a quick question right there while we're on Leahy?
Sure.
That is not the actual design that they were proposing for the Peck site, right? Because the one that they were proposing was not just a square. It had that courtyard in the middle.
That's right. So and we're going to talk a little bit about this. So a couple of these buildings are the model schools are two-story buildings that are sort of have a bigger footprint. This building has a very small footprint and it's much bigger. So this is 173,000 square feet, where we're talking about 105,000 square feet. So I imagine that has some impact on the cost per square foot, in the sense that there's not a straight line. As you build more square footage, it's not necessarily at the same price. So that's Leahy. I think that one. Trying to find the Flansburgh one. Oh, I'm in the wrong. Here we go. I'm in the wrong box. So this box is the Flansburgh project that is in the pipeline. Again, not built, right? This is at 658 a square foot. It's in Ashland, so it's not like the Leahy site. It's not a city block. It's it's probably more like where you're building, sort of in an open space, more spread out. And that one is bidding. Actually, it looks like it's bidding soon. But this says GMP 322. I think this must be bidding at a later date. So,
so Margaret, pardon me, but because you've moved.
No, I'm sorry, it has bid. This one has bid.
Oh, so that's a bid cost?
That's a bid cost, yeah. So they got their, you can see, actually, sorry, I can't point. The bottom line here in this little box, and I apologize, it's so small, is PS&B approval, project scope and budget approval. That means that estimate was finalized in 2020, and it looks like it was bid in March of 2022, so it's under construction. Okay. So now I'm gonna see if I can find, not seeing it. Amherst, Wakefield. Huh. A little strange. I'm not
ask a quick question as we're looking through that info.
Sure.
To compare those costs to like what the average building cost was, I don't really feel serves us anything, right? We know where we need to be, and we don't know. Some schools could have had so many bells and whistles that drove the cost up, so that wouldn't even be pertinent to us. Is there data on there of what those firms maybe estimated before the project was bid, and then what the bids actually came in at? Because I feel we also have to have a level of comfort that the architects who we go with have a good track record of saying it's going to be X, and it's pretty close to being X, as opposed to being way over.
Right.
And I don't know if that data is in there or anywhere.
To be honest, the MSBA may have that data. I don't have that data.
Yeah, I don't think that you did. I just was curious if.
Yeah, no, it's a great question about what I'm not finding. So weird. I'm not finding. It should be right around here. The Jones Whitsitt project, but I'm not getting the pop-up. So I may have put the circle in the wrong place, but it was here in the zone. I'm not getting the data. So it would be great if there were guarantees here, but I think in summary, these folks all have reasons to be proud of their records. Mount Vernon Group definitely has a very, very good record on cost performance. And I think that's probably what you can take away from the slide. So I'm gonna, I just realized I'm not sure you guys were seeing, were you seeing my pointers to you were, okay. Mm-hmm. All right, well, I'm gonna go back to the slide deck and talk about there aren't a ton of slides left, just to reassure you, and I'm aware we're at 6:45. So a big piece that came up last time was how the proposed schedules compare, and Whitney made the point that, and it's been made again here today, that if you have a shorter schedule, there is a savings and cost escalation. So I want to just sort of make a couple comments about process that are important to know. So as part of evaluating the schedules. So in order to submit the schematic design to the MSBA, as we talked about with Pete, you have to have done the design to a level that you can depend on that cost for the duration of the project. And the estimate that Pete's talking about, 60-page estimate, takes about 3 weeks, okay? So you have to draw everything, write the specs for everything that you're going to estimate, and then the estimator does their work. Then it comes to the building committee for review and hopefully approval. Then what happens is it goes to the MSBA staff to review and comment. That is about a 6-week process. And then they typically, not 100% of the time, but typically make a recommendation to the MSBA board to vote on it. There is also in parallel, DESE has to review and approve the project. And that's definitely, you know, a significant piece here because we're going to be redoing the special ed spaces. And then lastly, the MSBA board then votes, and the city has 120 days to get their funding in place. So why is that important? So when you look at these schedules, this is the schedule when I have looked at the schedule with you before. I've sort of looked at something in this range where the schematic design was going to take 4 to 5 months. And then there was, if it was a sort of standard project, what's called a design development phase, and then a construction documents phase, and then bidding and construction. So here's schematic design. This is where the price gets established right there. Design development and construction documents, bidding. I had always assumed, and you know, the other designers talked about this as well, that you would have a separate bid package for the demolition, right? 2 of the schedules were relatively similar. So both Flansburgh and Jones Whitsitt, the numbers were a little bit different. Flansburgh had taking about 7 months for schematic design because of the level of redesign that needs to be done, building systems, site. Then they had about, in total, a similar construction document period. Jones Whitsitt's is longer because they haven't, they're doing this for the first time, so they have to bid it. But they both pretty much ended up at the same point, with the building being fully occupiable in the early winter of 2026. The one that was really different, and I'm sure you will remember, was Mount Vernon Group. They have a very, very aggressive schedule. I definitely think if they are comfortable with this construction document duration of 7 months, you know, that's a significant savings. The part of this I'm not entirely comfortable with, which does not impact the overall schedule, you know, in terms of it being fast, is I think these red dotted lines are the submission dates to the MSBA. So their schedule seemed to be assuming that they would make a submission in on March 2nd. And actually, that would, you know, require all the work to be done, the work to be estimated, you all to take your vote by March 2nd. That seems to me hard to do because we would have to negotiate a contract with them before they could even get started. So this piece of it, I think, if we were not doing it with MSBA funding, if the city was sort of doing it on their own, they could, but because of the MSBA sort of funding gateway points, this seems like this piece of it would take a little longer. I see, Josh, you're looking furrowed. Does it make sense? I see Mark has a question.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of more a comment of, you know, seems like there's some unanswered questions we have to get probably from Mount Vernon Group. I think these are great points that you're bringing up, like with the schedule. Mm-hmm. Also, the cost, you know, they've looked at the site. Do they have an idea? Was it in that 500? You know, what exactly was in that?
Yeah.
Oh, if that's another meeting and we invite them in, or if it's a letter that helps us better understand those, you know, questions that we all probably have.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I would like to hear more from them also about it. It's not just you. Any other thoughts before I go to the next slide?
Yeah, I do. In regards to the red sign there, or that's assuming that they would start work prior to having a negotiated contract. So we'd be at risk for 100% of those costs prior to any MSBA approvals. Is that correct?
Well, that's true, and it's also sort of embedded in this point here, in that if you submit on March 2nd, you won't have the MSBA vote won't occur until April 26th, and they would, if they started CDs the next day, they would be going ahead at risk. So that 7 months, it does look pretty aggressive because of the need to get the funding in place, and that's both the MSBA's funding and your funding, right?
Well, I don't mind the risk as long as the architect is willing to absorb all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and also the construction element, as far as the time schedule is concerned, if you look at and add up the number of squares there, Mount Vernon Group is looking at a construction duration of 20 increments or 20 months, whereas Flansburgh is 24 or 2 years. So they've knocked 4 months off that somehow. And Jones Whitson is 25 months. So, that aggressive nature speaks to familiarity in my way. Either that or Frank Tedesco is somehow delusional to put this forward. But I don't see his level of experience and the historic documentation that you showed on the previous graph interpretation, which I think is awesome from the MSBA to have all that information on that point and click thing.
It's incredible.
So, and we do acknowledge that those historic totals as far as square footage are credible. That,
no question.
This is Mount Vernon Group has really, to our benefit, brought forward a schedule which is in our best interest, which, if they do believe is possible, is a tremendous money and time saver.
Okay. I see Mark's hand and I see Dave's hand. So Dave, why don't you go?
Yeah, just so I get your opinion, Margaret, on the aspect of Mount Vernon doing the demolition separately, having a separate process, ahead of other things. In your opinion, is that a good approach rather than the other ones would have it after finalizing everything else?
Well, I mean, yes, I think it's a good approach. It was what I had assumed in my own schedule. And to be honest, I think that could happen in any of these. It wasn't Frank Tedesco, the Mount Vernon Group really only proposed a design bid build schedule. The others sort of treated the demo piece as something that they would involve a CM with. But I do agree with Frank that you do a separate package and you do the demolition separately. So I think it would be possible in either of these schedules. I think that the other two designers came to it with wanting, a single bid cost. So this is the downside, right? If you're going to do the demolition first and you don't have a single cost, you're not going to know the total cost of the project till here, right? If you treat the demo and the construction as one thing, then you're going to know right here the total cost. So it's a different way. I would say what I did and what Frank did is a little riskier because you don't know the total project cost when you authorize the demolition cost. But it has the advantage overall that it speeds up the project because, as you can see in these diagrams, you get the construction done. I mean, the demolition site's clear and then the new contractor comes in and it's all done. Mark, do you have your hand up again?
I did. I just wanted to to Whitney's point, I think in their application, that Mount Vernon group, those projects did come in like anywhere from 18 to 20 months time frame, I believe, you know, for the 3 buildings that they did previously. But also, I need to get moving here. And,
yes, I bet you do.
So whatever, you know, you guys end up, you know, voting on, I personally wouldn't mind having them back in to flush out some of these questions. So,
Okay.
have a good evening, everybody.
Hey, Mark, do you have a preference one way or another?
Well, if I were, I like the Mount Vernon group. I like what they proposed. I like their time frame, but if looking at the schedule, if something that they can't uphold, you know, I'd have to rethink that. I also like to see if was site costs included in that, or demo costs included in that. You know, where are we, so we can better, you know, kind of look at, you know, apples to apples comparison. And you know, as I said before, I think either design from any of the architectural groups would work and satisfy our educational program. And it's just a matter of who we're going to pick to move forward with it at this point, and just trying to get a better understanding of, you know, comparing project to project.
Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
So, Margaret, can we just draw one conclusion from this this representation right here? If it were to be true, and if all these forecasts came to reality, and say the budget came in at $60 million, and looking at Peter's 5.5 estimated annual escalation, to save 1 year on a $60 million project would be $3.3 million.
Yes.
Overall project cost. Now, our portion of that would be what we have to
100%, 100%.
Which would be let's say 50%, or what are we going to say, 55%, so half of that.
100%. Because you're above the cap, the escalation you should consider as 100% on you, which is why it's such an important issue for you to raise.
So this approximately represents perhaps a $2.5 million savings for us.
I think that's a reasonable way to do the math. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
I'm gonna keep going here, and I promise there aren't many slides. Let me just. All right, so I'm gonna talk a little bit. One thing I thought was really hard about the interviews is you couldn't see the different design proposals next to each other. So I tried to do that a little bit for you. You know, the components that are relatively similar, which Pete referenced, is that, you know, the building systems. You're talking about air or ground source heat pumps. I'm working on a project in Amherst right now where there was quite a big difference between the air and ground source heat pumps, but the utility, in their case, National Grid, is coming forward with pretty significant rebates that make the difference between those two smaller. But in general, the air source heat pumps, which is what this project had assumed in its previous incarnation, is kind of the most cost-effective way to go. The building interiors, you know, they're schools. They're kind of relatively similar, but there are some ways in which the designs are pretty different. The biggest one is the size of the footprint. So, you know, the building footprint determines how much area you have of foundations and the number of stories. So two of these buildings, as I mentioned earlier, are sort of long, low buildings. And then the Jones Witz design is a taller building with a smaller volume and a smaller footprint. There are some differences in the building structure. Generally, most schools have used steel. Jones Witz was interested in comparing the cost of cross-laminated timber. And then there's some differences in how much skin, which is also called the exterior or the envelope, and then the differences in the approach to site design. So here I did my best it was not rocket science, to be honest, to put the three plans next to each other so you could see them. So this is Jones Witset's, this is Mount Vernon Group, and this is Flansburgh. And I apologize that the colors don't exactly align, but I did my best to. I'm looking at this as the classrooms being the kind of the measuring the building block, if you will. So you can see in Mount Vernon Group's plans, these are all the blue are the classrooms. In Flansburgh's, all the green are the classrooms, and then in Jones Witset's. So, you know, pretty significant difference in the footprint and the approach, right? The Jones Witset has a floor of, this isn't it, but they have their entry level is all public spaces, and then you go up to get to the classrooms. The other two buildings, because they are sort of more spread out, you come in, you know, in both cases, their entry point is approximately here. And then there are, in the Mount Vernon group, the gym and cafeteria are on a floor up. And then this is the lowest level. In the Flansburgh, there you come into a public space, and you know, again, it's kind of a semi-courtyard condition. So this is really just a visual comparison. I don't have anything else to add to it but that. But I'm going to show two more slides, and then I'll stop and we can talk. So the other thing I thought was important to think about was this, there's pretty significant differences in the design approach between the projects as they deal with the site. And I threw in some pictures here just to remind everybody about the topography change, which always amazes me when I go there, because I don't think of the site as being this complex. So I put the three designs next to each other. This one here is Mount Vernon Group. This is Flansburgh, and this is Jones Witset. These are a little harder to read because the graphics are very different. But, you know, in a nutshell, I think just starting from the Jones Witset, you can see smaller footprint, sort of more of a natural landscape approach, and somewhat less paving. Here, the buildings with the bigger footprints are trying to find their place on the site. I don't think you should take this as the final, but they're trying to figure out how to make adjustments to fit to the site. The reason that this comparison is important is that the MSBA caps reimbursement on site costs at 8%. So if you spend more, they'll only help you with a certain percentage. And the big things you want to avoid, if possible, are, you know, roads, paving, retaining walls, and importing soil. So if one of these two projects is chosen, that's going to be their particular challenge, I would say, with this project. And then lastly, this is the last slide, folks. I wanted to just say a word about expectations about the building, what the buildings look like. So again, they're very different. This is the Flansburgh elevation, because it's a very long building on this long side. This is a picture, because I didn't, what did I say? This is Mount Vernon Group. This is Flansburgh. This is Jones Witset. So there is a new energy code, and this couple different folks mentioned it in their interviews. And so they will be, this building, I believe, was the Jones Witset, was designed pretty close to the energy code. These two projects were designed and built at an earlier point. So they will have to make modifications to the exterior. There's probably going to be somewhat less glazing, more insulated envelopes, high performing building systems in order to get to the level of energy performance. So again, this doesn't mean that there's a right or wrong here, but I want to make sure that people understand that if one of the model schools is chosen, you will be seeing the designers sort of work on these pieces of the project to try to figure out how to make sure they can meet the code. So we're an hour into it, and I really want to stop talking. What I'd like to do is to go around the room and hear what people think. And I just want to refer back to what we have to figure out is both what we think of this as a group, as well as how to go about taking next steps. So I thought I'd like to go around the room. I'd like to call on each person, make sure everybody's had a chance to speak, and then see if someone wants to make a motion on next steps. Does that seem like a reasonable way to go?
Yeah, that sounds good, Margaret.
Okay. So I'm going to take Aaron's meeting notes, and I'm going to start with Mayor Garcia, unless you get to go last if you want to, since you're the mayor.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't want to, I like to work from the bottom up. I don't want to influence other people's thoughts.
Okay, so why don't we come back to you then? And we'll go to Whitney instead. Whitney, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I just had it muted. How about Mr. Collmore? You have any comments?
How about Mr. Collmore?
Yeah, just my concern is still the parking area.
Yeah.
Okay? If we pick up the parking area along McIntosh Terrace, does that reduce the parking space we need around the school?
It definitely could. I will say that, and Aaron Brunel brought this up before, it would require, I believe, some permitting in the city in order to do that. So it might be something that came with the design development part of the project rather than the initial stages. But I, since my last point was part of the cost here is paving, right? That's a reasonable cost savings thing to look at, to reduce parking you're creating and using parking that exists. It just might not be the first thing you take on as part of the design, because you have to go through some permitting hoops to get there.
Thank you.
So, Tom, I would like to address you first and to compliment you on your project manager here assigned to the Holyoke Public Schools. I mean, she wants to stop talking, but I think the visual presentation, which she has just made, has been a benefit to the entire process of what we're trying to do here to pull our heads around this whole endeavor.
Well,
so thank you.
Well, yeah, and thank you for the compliment. But yes, Margaret is well established in this MSBA process and very much understands it, and that's why she's been on this project and its predecessor for a good long time, because it's a tough project, and I'm glad it's moving forward. I'm thrilled it's moving forward, because when it never missed its vote, it was just deflating in our office. So we're very happy we're moving forward here.
Well, at this point, Holyoke has a tremendous St. Patrick's Day and an Irish heritage from its past, but also carries on through an annual parade. And I'm sure Margaret would qualify for the coveted Shillelagh Award at this point.
Oh, the first year I was on the project, I went and saw the parade from someone's apartment. I brought back pictures and showed Tom, who's the true Irishman in the office anyway. So,
well, so you're welcome anytime, mid-March, and we're hoping for an early spring. But I think the specifics here, and the reason why we're having this conversation all over again, is because of the fact that we weren't able to achieve a level of security within the financial realm from the previous project that allowed us to bring it to fruition. It was too much for the community to swallow. So what we're attempting to, and it's no secret to anybody, resounding no. So 2/3. So what we anticipate to do now is to bring a level of sensibility. I think, one of the previous school committee members had said, well, if I went to buy a new car, I know kind of sort of how much I want to spend ahead of time. So the mayor is working very diligently to try to bring together the budget and the bonding authorization capability and so forth, and any other possible revenue streams to make this whole magic happen. But it does come down to the reality that a $60 million project at a 5.5% escalation is going up in price $10,000 a day. Okay, so we really need to be specific to understand exactly what these costs are. And I won't say they're out of control, but they're very hard to catch once they get out of reach. So for us to be able to look pragmatically, because that's what it is, at a level of forecast for specific factors which relate totally around the MSBA's ability to help us achieve these goals, comes down to the square foot cost, as we know, that we're trying to wrap our heads around, the reimbursable portion of those that the community still has a hard time understanding, because everybody is told it's 80%, but it's nowhere near 80%. So that makes Mr. Tallman's job an uphill battle from day one to try to get his colleagues to wrap their head around that notion. And then, are we actually getting the best value we can? And that, I think, is an area of focus that we can bring to fruition. We can attempt to judge, because these are the three alternatives that we have available to us. And the historic graph that Margaret put up from the MSBA that shows very specifically, but truthfully, what these three different firms have been able to bring forward from their past projects, but also where they are currently. I think there's one clear design team that brings forward an opportunity, not only from the square footage cost, but also from their best faith estimate in regards to bringing these dreams into design reality, into constructed structure, that it's clearly pointing to Mount Vernon Group. I have absolutely nothing but tremendous respect for Jones Whitsitt. I have personal friends with those individuals. We spent a lot of time together trying to bring about the community's desires to create a beautiful educational facility for the city of Holyoke. But I think that what they are up against now is a realm in which Frank Tedesco with Mount Vernon Group replicates with cookie cutter accuracy. He's talking about design packages for demo. I think there is some speculation, no question, Margaret, in regards to what happens there. You don't really know the price, but you're going to pay for it anyways. So, yeah, we are assuming best value at each different incremental stop. And if Frank wants to, again, assume the responsibilities of trying to drive this to successful completion by assuming risk on his own company during times of approval and those normal stopgap and board of directors recommended approvals from the MSBA, I appreciate that aggressive nature, because it's not an unbridled opportunity that he sees as being reckless. This is something that he's willing to co-labor with us. And I think that speaks volumes to me in regards to his partnership that his firm would bring to the community. And those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Whitney. Aaron Brunel.
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts and just a lot of concerns overall. I think we should definitely bring in two of the three firms. I think most of us are leaning towards two, based on the conversations we had towards the end of the last meeting. And I think we need to get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty about finance. I don't feel like we got any true projections of where the costs will come in. I'm definitely have some concerns about the site costs. Looking at the two designs more closely, the fact that, having a real estate background, I understand a ranch is more expensive to build than a colonial, because a ranch stretches out. So you have more foundation, more roof. So the first designer's project is more foundation, more roof. and a lot more site work with their idea of having the road go around the building. I have concerns about the grading that would need to be done, the soil movement, and the overall cost there. And I don't think that we got a good figure on that when we were originally presented to. So I feel like that's information we really need to wrap our heads around. Like Margaret pointed out, we do only get back 8% of site costs on certain things. So we really, really need to keep in mind that we have a very complicated site over at the location and how much that's going to potentially add to the budget. But I definitely believe that we should bring in the two designers again, ask a little bit more questions about financing. I still lean towards Jones Whitsitt. I think their design is everything that the city could want. I think that they spent a lot of time getting to know our community, and not that the other firm doesn't have the opportunity to do that. But, one of the other things we talked about in planning this meeting tonight was the fact that the timeline, very nervous about the potential timeline with the first firm. Basically, if you guys look at the diagram that Margaret provided for us, you'll notice that they're looking to jumpstart their end of the work as soon as we approve them potentially as designers before the MSBA agrees to fund the project. So if they start doing work for us and then the project doesn't end up getting funded, we would be on the hook for that difference. So I think they're counting on being able to get a jump start, and that's how their time frame was so much shorter. So I'm just a little worried that his presentation went too good. Like, there's got to be more to it. It can't be that much under budget and that quick. It's just, how is that feasible? So I would definitely like to get them and Jones Whitsitt back in to discuss the finance aspect of where they really see their projects coming in at.
Thanks, Erin. So Mark was next, but he's spoken. So Jamie Morrow, please.
Hi. I feel like I'm kind of, in alliance with the rest of the group. Mount Vernon group, Jones Whitsitt would be the two. I like also some things I like about Mount Vernon group, just because it's a middle school, the 2-floor instead of the 4-floor. I mean, even the Flansburgh had the 2-floor. I just think for middle school kids, 2-floor, in my opinion, is better than 4. Again, it comes down to dollars and cents, who can build it for the price that we can afford. I had in the survey that you guys sent out, one thing about the Mount Vernon group, that they had that quarter in the middle, and then from talking to people that work in actual schools with kids, and how they say the outdoor space in the courtyards, those are just totally not utilized. So is there something we could do instead of that would be utilized more, that would, make their design better? So again, I think another interview with those two might help split hairs that, people are between these two groups. But also too, we have a timeline. We have to try to pull the trigger on this project that if the school is going to get built. So.
Okay. Jessica Perella.
Hi, everybody. Hi, thank you, Margaret. So I'm kind of in alliance with everybody. I really appreciate Whitney's point there and Mark's point. So I don't want to reiterate what everybody has said, but if there was no cost, what would we pick? If cost wasn't an issue right now, what perspective would you have with Jones Whitsitt and Mount Vernon? Because again, I don't know too much with cost, and I have faith that no matter what it's going to cost, we're going to find a way to afford this. So my heart is for Mount Vernon. He was willing to adapt to us, and I know maybe he seems like too good, as Erin had said, but at the same time, when we look at the data, he has more projects under his belt more recently compared to Whitsitt, and why is that? So I feel just he was tailored to us in a limited time, and it was specific to our need in that limited time. So he kind of proved himself, I guess is my point. But the under budget is huge. I like what Jamie had just said, the 2 floors. I'm for that, in case of emergency, and just things happen, or staff needs to reach a student, it's easier, and then just, I don't know what else to say. When you showed us the floor plan, the parking, I mean, it's an issue, but it wasn't much of a difference from Whitsett to Mount Vernon, in my perspective. Like, the parking lot, if you really look at it, the roads were kind of very similar. And the parking lot was just adjusted closer to the school in Mount Vernon. So I understand the perspective of professionals, and I am grateful for all of you and your opinions and wisdom. But on a more basic perspective, I feel Mount Vernon might actually suit us better, but we need more information.
Got it. All right. Thank you, Jessica. How about Rena?
Hi. Thank you.
And I've been on the move the whole time.
Yeah. Well, there's a performance going on in the high school, so a few of us on here are here.
We're scattered at different offices throughout the high school.
So I'm like everyone else between the Mount Vernon and Jones Winslet, but I do like Mount Vernon more. Again, the cost and their timeline. But again, you brought up some good risk factors today that more questions came up. So, but those are my two, and I'm leaning more to Mount Vernon. Again, they, they did what they can for the community, what they had, and they did, everyone likes the other one, Jones Winslet, because they were embedded in our community for years, and in a prior project that didn't go through. But I think Mount Vernon did a good job. Thinking of Holyoke putting it together, their project. I get it, but it comes down to cost. So if we can get our questions answered, and as time and money, Wendy Anderson, time and money. So I'm with that.
Thank you, Rena. Peter Tallman.
Thank you, Margaret. I just want to let you know, sorry I missed the last meeting, but I did see the whole video. I think it was about a 4-hour meeting. It was excellent.
Well done. Thank you.
I did send in my survey to Aaron. I really like Mount Vernon, but also I like to have them in and Jones Winslet again. The cost is important, of course, being on the finance committee and thinking of my colleagues and it's a money issue. I don't want to see a project come in where it's, cutting corners and it's going to be done quick and we're saving money. I want a project that's going to be solid. If it's going to cost a little bit, but I want a project that's going to be done right. And I really was impressed by the way Jones Winslet really was involved in the community. It seemed like they really, because they've done their work already, but it seems like they really are engaged in the community of Holyoke. And not that Mount Vernon wasn't. But I think there's a few more questions we could ask. I would love to have them both in again. I think Margaret did a great job in those slides to give us a little idea of the comparisons in some of the schools. I think even before we make a vote, maybe, I don't know if it's possible to maybe some of us to maybe see one of the schools that's done or being built. I think that'd be a great idea just to get a little better understanding of the different groups. And I just hope that we could maybe have them in again and really get a good feel for, where we're going to get the best bang for the dollar. Like I said, I just want to emphasize, I don't want a project that's going to be cutting corners and something that's going to be saying, oh, we're going to get this done. And it's only cost this much because we've done, 3 or 4 schools. I want a project that's solid and that's affordable. I know sometimes it's difficult to get both, but I want something that's good for the community in the long run.
So, to be honest, Peter, I appreciate you bringing up the site visit thing. It's absolutely, it's typically done as part of a model school process. I think it would be very informative. The only thing I'll say is that I think anybody that goes should go to 2 schools, one by each. Shouldn't be like some people go to the Jones Winslet School and some people go to a Mount Vernon school. Could I see a show of hands of the people who are here as to how many people would be interested in going on a site visit? I see 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to call that 8 of the people who are here. So
could we, real quick for notes, I can't see everyone's faces. I have Aaron, Whitney, Peter, Jamie, Jessica as interested. Who else was interested?
Wendy, Anthony, Camelia,
Deborah,
Rena.
Okay.
Becky.
Yeah, okay, that's more than 8.
Yeah, more than 8.
Okay.
So not typically so easy to schedule because school is in session, but let me look into the art of the possible. What I think we'll probably do is send out a doodle poll. It would be a half-day effort, right, to go to, I think you would probably want to go to the Good Now School in Marlboro, and then Jones Whitsett has a couple of schools that are closer to you. So let me think a little bit about that, but I think it would be great. I think it would really inform your decision, and I definitely encourage us to figure out a way to do that. Okay, so just keeping going here.
It probably need to be before our next meeting because, you know, even based on your conversation with the MSBA, even not voting on a designer tonight is not typical. So we have to keep in mind that if we have them back next time, we're probably going to be making a decision. So we'd want to try to tour them in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. So let me get on that tomorrow and figure out what the art of the possible is. And you'll almost certainly get a doodle poll probably from me, trying to figure out the best possible date, and then we'll work with the schools to figure that out. If we have to split it up into 2 pieces, we will. I would just say if you do one, I'd really ask you to commit to going to see the other one as well.
And we could move back the December 15th meeting to the following week if needed. We might not want to do December 22nd, but we could, do a Monday or Tuesday night maybe.
To change my calendar for December.
Okay.
So Deborah Vega, you were up next.
Great. Hi, everyone. So I am in agreement. I like the 2 schools that have been discussed. I do want to see a cost comparison. I mean, really the apples to apples, but I don't want to settle. You know, when Jessica said, what school would we want if cost wasn't a factor? And I know cost is a huge factor, but if cost wasn't a factor, my heart leans toward Jones Whitsett, and for many reasons. Natural light's very important to me, and I think it's important to learning and just the overall atmosphere of a school. And the other 2 models felt more boxed in, where Jones Whitsett actually considered where the light comes in during the day. They have the open design of the entrance, and there's so much natural light throughout. And I do like the many floors to divide the grades, because I do feel like there's a big difference between, the 6th graders and the 8th graders. And even though it feels far away, I just feel like that division makes sense to me. So there's lots of reasons I like the Jones Whitsett project. I love the way it looks. I think it's beautiful design. And I don't want to feel like I'm settling for a model school that's been plunked on a site and tried to make work in some way. That said, I am very interested in the schedule for Mount Vernon. I think it's almost too good to be true. As we were shown tonight, like, is it really possible to get it done by 2025? And their cost savings history is also, I know, very important. So if we could have them back in and parse this out, I would be very happy. Thanks.
Thanks, Deborah. David?
Yeah, well, first, I really like Whitney's 2 points. That as far as the demolition, I think that's pretty much a neutral factor. That would probably cost about the same, whichever designer we're with there.
Definitely.
And then as far as the, you know, being speeding up the time frame, it would be obviously saving cost. And, you know, if the contractor is willing to go ahead before the contract is signed, does that mean it's on us or is that on the contractor? I would think it would be more on the contractor going ahead before the contract is finalized. And well, I think the big factor that came out tonight would be the issue between are we fitting the building to the site or adapting the site to fit the building? And obviously, you know, we want to go with having the building more adapted to the site because that would be the higher reimbursement cost or the higher reimbursement rate would be on the building rather than on the site work.
Yeah.
Although I strongly think that the two floors would be better, both in terms, you know, beyond aside from that, as far as fitting in with the neighborhood and as far as operating the school. So I think really we want to have the, you know, especially the Mount Vernon come back and, you know, give the factors of what would be the cost of the site work versus the cost of the building.
Great, thank you. Kenia. Looking for Kenia.
I did not see her today. I did not.
Okay.
I also did not see Kathy Ortiz.
Okay. So Jackie Glasheen.
Everything everybody just said. I love Jones Whitsitt because I feel like they're embedded in our community. I liked the price and the timeline of the other better. I'm just really concerned. The city council is not going to pay for something that's exorbitantly priced. Like I just am afraid that that's where the buck's going to stop. And I think ultimately it's down to dollars and we'd have to identify the one that is the cheapest because it frightens me every day that the price goes up every day. And every single day I'm like, it's not going to happen. If we keep waiting, it's not going to happen. That's my fear.
That is a real fear. All right, Camelia, do you have something you'd like to add?
Yo quisiera hacer una pregunta primero antes de comentar. Ellos, los dos equipos, ellos han ido a la escuela a supervisar el terreno.
The question she asked is if if all three designers had an opportunity to actually visit the site.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sí.
So yeah, sí.
Okay. Pues sí, lo que quería otra cosa quería preguntar, el de Jones. Ellos habían comentado sobre hacer pisos de madera.
She asked if Jones Whitsitt had made comments about wood flooring.
So it's somewhat unusual to have wood flooring in a school. I believe that in their design, and this is an interesting question to ask, I think, of the other designers about typical finishes. I believe that they were using a lot of what's called linoleum, which is a flooring product that is resilient, has a little give. It's not hard, and it's made with a natural material, so it doesn't have the chemical sort of off-gassing that older flooring materials have. But I will say that I think that we would find if we asked this question, which perhaps we should, about typical finishes, that's probably a common floor finish for schools for this design group at this time.
So, ese es un producto que puede durar por muchos años, que no va a tener que tener muchos tener que estar dándole remodelaciones o cosas, o mantenimiento, mucho mantenimiento. Es un producto que dura bastante.
She's asking if the product that you speak of, the flooring, if it is durable, if you know, or if it's going to require regular maintenance all the time.
It's actually less maintenance than the sort of older material that was used more commonly when for instance, when the current tech school was built. So.
So, yo creo que a mí me encantó el de la propuesta de Jones porque ellos están como que más conectados con la comunidad y los niños también porque ellos preguntaron sobre el de cómo ellos se sentían, qué ellos querían o que ellos proponían para la escuela y también lo que dijo Deborah, que la luz ayuda también la luz natural ayuda a que haya días que no tengas que usar la luz eléctrica para alumbrar los salones. Pero lo que me preocupó fue que ellos no dieron un precio concreto de cuánto sería el costo de la escuela.
She said she really liked Jones Whitsitt. A lot of the comments that were made around being connected to the community, knowing our kids. She agreed with Deborah's point about natural light, and she really likes and embraces the idea of a building that has more natural light. And her one concern was that she didn't feel Jones Whitsitt had concrete numbers to present for us. And that's a concern that she has.
Tal vez para la próxima ellos nos puedan dar un número.
Maybe next time if we do call them back in, maybe we could get better numbers. De los dos, ¿verdad? Yeah.
Right. Gracias. So the two folks who are left are fearless leaders.
Pero que ellos no dieron un número concreto. Que fue un poquito decepcionante, pero me encanta lo de que dura poco en lo de Frank, que dura poquito tiempo, o sea que eso también favorece en lo que son los pagos de los, obviamente porque ellos cobran por hora cuando ellos están construyendo, sería menos el costo en el poco tiempo que ellos van a hacer. Se ve lindo, pero difícil de creer.
Yes, she said she liked Mount Vernon's short timeline, and she sees that there could be some costs. And she said that looks really good, but she's a little skeptical. She'd like to have more information to believe that timeline is real.
He is in good company. All right. So the two folks to wrap up with are Anthony and the mayor. So
okay.
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I'll let the mayor.
And I'll re-sign in when I get home. The schools, like the janitors, like give him, I got to get out of the high school. But I live 3 minutes away, so I'll log back in as soon as I get home, you guys.
That's fine. And actually, I'm forgetting Erin Linville. So Erin, do you want to go next?
Oh, no, I'm not a voting member.
You're not a voting member. Okay, so it's Anthony.
So I'll try to keep it as quick as possible. Like all costs being the same, I think Jones Whitsitt, it has a better design. And I think that I want to raise that point with everyone on the committee that we don't really need to vote. I know we have to vote on a designer, but we're really voting on a design.
Yeah.
We're picking between two designs, not between two designers, two designs. And if the designs cost the same, I think that Jones Whitsitt, I like that design better. I love what they were doing with the dingle and the connection to Holyoke High. I love the family engagement center that they have there, the community center. I loved, I think the smaller footprint is also better. There's more outdoor space and more efficiency, you know, with the smaller footprint. That's gonna, you know, something that I consider long-term. I would imagine that it would be less costs in utilities and things like that, and more costs that we could direct to the classroom, as opposed to a larger footprint, larger roof, you know, like a lot, like to me, I think that that's a more efficient, long-term, even annual cost basis. But I will say, like, you know, if the difference between the two plans is $200 per square foot or even $150 per square foot, then, you know, that would definitely sway my decision. I think what I heard today was we looked at all of the different designs, and a lot of people have a lot of questions around, yes, we saw some price, but based on the design that we're looking at, we got a lot more questions on how. I think both firms should come and really put a little more effort into giving us an estimate that we can feel comfortable with, given all of the things that we have concern with, the larger footprint, the grade. So I think that, like I said, all things being the same, I would go with Jones Whitsitt as a design. But if the cost is drastically different, I would go with Mount Vernon, and I don't think I'm interested in the design from the second.
From Flansburgh.
From Flansburgh.
Got it. All right, Mayor, you get the last word.
Thank you, Margaret. My favorite design is Jones. I think there's definitely, as far as this group is concerned, there's an expectation from us, and also even considering what transpired from the last time around when we were trying to build the two new middle schools. The expectation from us is to build what we need that's the most feasible. You know, when we reference the first design there as the cheapest, it doesn't necessarily make it the worst one. You know, I was, as everyone was talking and I was thinking about this, my wife and I bought a brand new car over the weekend, and our hearts were settled on, you know, vehicles like the Chevy Suburban or Ford Expedition. Instead, we bought the top of the line Hyundai Palisade. It meets our needs. We absolutely love it. Much cheaper than the Suburban and you know what I mean? So it's not, it's doing what's feasible within the capacity and limits of what the city can handle. And I think that that's what the community at large is expecting from us. And at the moment, until we bring back these folks and listen to, get some questions answered. And I think also we need to consider what Anthony just mentioned about longer term operations. If, you know, if we can better understand a little more each of the points that people were making about bringing these folks back, and we can also look at the longer term impact on operations and how that, you know, might help this group a little more. And if it's indeed true that the first design is going to be much more considerable, the cost is going to be much lower considerably, and still meet the needs that we need for the district, I think the community at large is going to expect us to go in that direction, and it's a little bit more palatable for the council. And as much as I want to go with the first design, as much as I wanted to get that Suburban, or shoot, maybe even what is it, Anthony? What do you got? Maybe if I could only afford that.
Talk about what car I got, Josh.
if only I could afford that Land Rover.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you know, that's where my mind is. I think everyone.
I wish I had a city vehicle.
No, you don't. Believe me. But yeah, so that's where I stand. I think you guys did a great job. Where we are right now in this process, we're doing exactly what was expected us to do. We're looking at the different options. We're trying to understand the costs. And we want the end result of this process when we present to the public and to the council what our decision is, for us to be able to say, we looked at every option. These are the options that are going to meet our needs. And because, and here's the option that we believe is going to be the most feasible. And we're checking those boxes that are going to allow us to de-escalate as much as possible public kickback, public concern. And I mean, that's a goal that, I'm trying to achieve here. And I think, I don't think we're too off track here. So that's my 2 cents.
All right. So, I just want to flash back to, first of all, thank you all. And thank you to our fearless translator, who's just been doing amazingly. Fearless translator, well done. I just wanted to sort of toggle back to where we started, which was, so we did the presentation, we had a discussion. I've been keeping a tab here on not number 1 and 2, but keeping a tab on the Flansburgh. I think this is sort of consistent with the last conversation. It keeps coming up that they're sort of the third for folks, but there is not a clear decision there. I would say there's a leaning towards Mount Vernon Group for many, but there's a desire for more information. So it seems to me that the sensible thing to do would be to do 2 things. So one is to arrange a visit to one Mount Vernon Group school and to one Jones Whitsitt school, which will be a scramble, but we'll try and do it before the next meeting, which is slated for the 15th. There is one Thursday a week later, the 22nd, but we're really sort of edging into the holiday season. And then to test with Mount Vernon Group and Jones Whitsitt if they would be willing to come back. I'd like to draft a set of questions based on what I heard tonight and circulate them for comment to see if I'm sort of getting at the right pieces for you all to get the information back that we need. And then if they're willing and able to come back on the 15th, they would have a specific set of list of things to lights just went back on here. Specific list of things to address in a second interview. I don't think we can require them to do a second interview. It really has to be an invitation. But I think this conversation is available to them if they want to hear the detail, because we have the recording of it, if they want to hear the detail of what was discussed. Does that sound like a good plan for next steps?
Sure.
Okay. What I think we would then want to do at the meeting after that is to vote. So we could put a tentative vote on we have these 2 interviews, and then we could put a tentative vote on the agenda for the 15th. And if folks don't feel ready and able to vote on the 15th, we could come back together on the 22nd to do the vote. Does that sound okay? It's a start.
I also just want to say, like, Thursday is a good night, but like we could also do a Tuesday. There's nothing that says we have to do a Thursday.
That is true. Yeah.
Just pick a night, let me know.
Okay, well, I'm going to take this down. You all have been very durable, and the comments were great. So thank you for being so thoughtful. And it does feel like we're coming together towards a decision. And I think everybody's learned a lot in the process. So I think you'll be better prepared when we launch. Erin.
Would we want to have any group do reference checks before the next meeting? like clearly whoever they list as references are going to say good things about them, but I'm wondering if there's something around like some questions around pricing or keeping to the schedule or willing to adapt and get to know your community, like more of those like how we work questions that would be useful. And whoever did the reference checks could type up the notes and share them with the rest of the committee.
I think it's a great idea if folks have time. I can do some, but I think it would be more meaningful for folks on the committee to do them if they can make the time for it.
How about people email me if they are interested in doing reference checks, and I could work with you to like, and okay, so email me if there's any questions you definitely want and the reference checks. Email me if you're interested in doing some of the reference checks. And at the very least, like Margaret Whitney, who I will volunteer, and I would like agree on the questions and do the phone calls. My guess, I know Mark's not on here, but my guess is he would be interested potentially if he's has time. So I'll email him too.
We actually have a kind of you can adjust it to suit, but we have a standard form that we use for reference checks that can be a starting point.
Great. If you could send that to me tomorrow, that'd be fabulous.
I'll do that. Okay.
Is that it, Margaret?
It is it from me. You guys need to vote on minutes or take any other action?
Is that what's next on the agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Now the minutes were, people just got them like an hour before. So I'm not sure if it's fair to vote on the minutes or if you'd like to wait till the next meeting to vote on those minutes.
So how do members of the group feel about that? Do you want to wait till the next meeting to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
Yeah, we'll make a table so we get a chance to look at them.
Yeah.
All right, we got a motion to table. We have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Raina. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes. All right, so those minutes are tabled. I'm just pulling up the agenda now. Is there other items on the agenda, Erin?
It was just a run through the actions. Anthony was going to see if there were any students interested in being on the school building committee. We reached out to 6. We thought some might be here tonight. No one is, so we'll follow up with them.
Okay.
And then the rest were things that we already covered. And then the last thing is our next meeting, December 15th, and then there has been very low interest in in-person meetings. So we wanted to ask the group, do you want us to be offering these in-person meetings or not?
Do people like the Zoom meetings? Do you want a hybrid or do we want to go in person?
And just to be clear, like it's in a conference room watching the Zoom on a TV. And so far, it's been me and Dave Yost most of the time, so that doesn't really feel like an in-person meeting. It just feels like a place where we can zoom in. So if it's I would say that if it's just going to be me and Dave, that we just make it remote. I'm fine with remote.
I think we should.
Fine with Zoom.
Sorry, Dave.
I think we should keep the option open. We can always if people aren't interested, and we just keep it on Zoom, and for tonight we should have had it at the high school.
Clearly. That was a mistake. I mean, there is going to be a point as the design progresses that the committee is going to want to meet in person. There's just some things that are better to come together to look at samples and design approaches. So I totally believe we will have some in-person meetings, but this has become a pretty common meeting format for a lot of building committees.
Yeah, but those will be full in person, right? Not
full
in
person.
Yeah. I totally agree with full in person.
Yeah, let's, I guess, continue Zoom, get us through the holidays, and then when you're ready for the full in person, we'll just do that. What do people think?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. All right. What is there any? Sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
No, sorry, I was waving by. That's it for me.
Oh, is there any other business or comments or does any that people want to throw out there before we check out? All right. When's our next meeting, Aaron, again?
The 15th, Thursday night, I would say, unless we, for some reason, like couldn't get those those tours until the 16th, then we should look at the next week, but plan on the 15th.
All right. So there you have it. Meeting on the 15th. And have a good night, everybody. Thank you so much for all your time, your effort, your energy. This is going to be great.
Motion adjourned. Good night.
Motion adjourned. Good night.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.